I wasn't supposed to be there. I mean, I was technically, but I only joined the LARPing camp because my roommate Julian had an extra spot and practically begged me to tag along. "Come on, Eli," he said, pacing our living room 2 weeks earlier. "It's just 1 week. You'll get fresh air, meet weird nerds, wear a fake sword. It'll be good for you." "Good for me," was code 4. "You've been in a post-breakup funk for 3 months, and it's getting sad." So I said yes. Which is how I ended up standing in the middle of a forest clearing on a humid Monday morning, wearing a canvas tunic, leather boots that weren't mine, and wondering how exactly I got talked into role-playing a medieval messenger named Thorn. Yes, Thorn, with an E. The camp was called Mythwood, and it was a week-long immersive experience where people divided into factions, completed quests, and fought battles in the woods using foam swords and elaborate plot lines. Think summer camp meets Renaissance fair with more yelling and less cell service. Julian was already in character by the time we arrived. He ran off to join his team, the Blue Falcons, leaving me to be sorted by a group of organizers who took their roles very seriously. "Thorn of the Riverlands," one of them said dramatically, handing me a red sash. "You now serve under the Crimson Claw." Apparently, I was on the enemy team, which was fine by me. I figured I'd blend in, get some nature, maybe make it through the week without humiliating myself. But then he walked in. His name was Caspian, and he was the Crimson Claw team leader. The first thing I noticed, the way people deferred to him, even the organizers. He wasn't just some guy playing pretend. He was his character, commanding, confident, and unfairly attractive. Caspian wore this fitted leather armor that looked like it had been made for him, his dark hair pulled back in a low knot, a faint scar drawn down one cheek as part of his character. His voice carried across the clearing, not loud, but purposeful. He gave off this quiet intensity that made people listen. I tried not to stare. I failed. When his eyes landed on me, something clicked. Not recognition, but interest. "You're new," he said. "Yeah. First time," I replied, trying not to fumble the foam sword in my hand. He stepped closer, and I swear the air got heavier. "I'm Caspian," he said, "commander of the Crimson Claw." "Thorn," I replied, then immediately cringed. "I didn't pick the name," he smirked. "Thorn suits you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and tried to look like I wasn't short-circuiting. He stepped around me, just slow enough that it felt intentional, and then leaned in, his voice low. "Stick close. First-timers tend to get ambushed." And just like that, he was gone, back to barking orders at other players, leaving me standing there with my heart beating way too fast. That night, after the opening ceremony and a chaotic forest skirmish where I got killed in under 5 minutes, I returned to my team's tent, still buzzing from the way Caspian had looked at me during the battle. There was no mistaking it. He saw me. Not just as some newbie or a background player. No. There was something else in the way he kept glancing back during the sparring matches, something in how his tone shifted when he gave me directions. And then, later, while the rest of the team celebrated our first victory with a tankard of watered-down cider and dramatic retellings, Caspian found me near the fire. "You fought well," he said. I raised an eyebrow. I tripped over a rock and got fake stabbed in the ribs. He chuckled, sitting beside me on the log. "Takes skill to fall that convincingly." I laughed. Really laughed, for the first time in a while. Then the silence settled. Not awkward, just charged. "I wasn't sure about coming," I admitted quietly, staring into the fire. "Thought this whole thing would feel silly." "And now?" he asked, his voice softer. I glanced at him. The firelight flickered in his eyes, casting shadows over the lines of his face. Up close, he looked even better, unfairly so. "Now it feels different," I said. He nodded. "Good. Because the real game starts tomorrow," I tilted my head. "And what does that mean?" He smiled, slow and secretive. "You'll see." Then he stood, leaving his fingers to brush lightly against mine as he walked away. And just like that, I was no longer just pretending to be someone else in a fantasy world. Because whatever Caspian had planned, I had a feeling it wasn't going to stay in the realm of fiction for long. The next morning started with a war horn. I jolted awake inside my tent, heart thudding, only to hear a staff member outside yelling in full medieval affectation, "Rise, warriors! The day's conquest begins!" Julian, whose tent was a few feet away on the Blue Falcon's side of camp, waved lazily as we crossed paths at the communal wash station. "Did your team haze you yet?" he asked, spitting toothpaste into a bush. "Not yet," I muttered, "though their leader might be plotting something worse." He smirked. "Caspian?" I tried to play dumb. "You know him?" "Oh, everyone knows Caspian. He's like the final boss of Mythwood. Kind of a legend around here. Players come back just to try and beat him." "No one does." I dried my face, pretending to care more about the towel than the rising flush in my cheeks. "He's intense!" Julian raised an eyebrow. "That's one word for it." I didn't say more, I couldn't, because something had shifted in me since last night. The way Caspian's fingers brushed mine near the fire, accidental or not, was still replaying in my head on a loop. I told myself it was just camp immersion, just the heat, just the costume. But deep down, I knew better. By noon, our teams were back in the woods, participating in a mission called The Dragon's Tribute, basically a flag hunt with puzzle clues and ambushes. I was assigned to a small scouting party. Caspian was with us, naturally. Sword slung across his back, he moved like someone who had spent too many weekends in the woods playing pretend but somehow made it look badass. We moved in formation through the trees, the sun filtered down in golden beams. Somewhere to our left, another team rustled in the underbrush. One of our players, a guy named Sven, held up a fist. "Halt." Caspian leaned close to whisper instructions, close enough that I felt his breath against my ear. "You take the ridge," he murmured. "Double back behind the glade. Cut off anyone coming from the east." I turned my head a fraction, our faces barely a foot apart. "You trust me with that?" I asked. His expression didn't change. "I trust what I saw yesterday." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, like there was a second meaning buried beneath the first. Something personal, private. I nodded, swallowed, and peeled off. The next hour was a blur of pretend danger. Sneaking behind trees, dodging foam arrows, shouting fake incantations. It was dorky and ridiculous, and way more fun than I had any right to admit. And then I saw him, Caspian, pinned against a tree by two players from Julian's team. He wasn't out yet, still fighting. His sword knocked one attacker back, but the second lunged. I reacted without thinking. I came in from the side, barreled into the Blue Falcon player, and the two of us tumbled into the leaves. My sword clattered uselessly beside us, but the point had been made. "Retreat," someone shouted from the Falcon side. The guy the first tackled took the cue and rolled away, laughing. When the dust settled, I sat up, leaves in my hair, out of breath and buzzing. Caspian stood over me, offering his hand. "You all right, Thorn?" he asked, in character but grinning. I took his hand. His grip was warm, strong. "Did I just save your life?" "You did," he said, and something in his eyes softened. "And now I owe you." Our hands lingered just a moment, too long before he pulled away. That night, after dinner and some incredibly earnest bard performances around the main campfire, I snuck off to sit by the lake. I needed air, space. A moment without quests and team roles and pretend honor. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find Caspian approaching, still in costume, cloak flowing behind him in the breeze. "No team meetings tonight?" I asked. He sat beside me, arms resting loosely over his knees. "Consider this one." We were quiet for a bit. The water shimmered under the moonlight. Crickets hummed. "You're not like most new players," he said finally. "Because I trip with style?" He smirked, but it faded quickly. "No, because you don't pretend." "Not really. Most people come here to play a role. You just show up. And somehow, that makes it real." I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I didn't. I let the silence hang between us, thick and electric. "Earlier," he said slowly, "when you tackled that guy for me, that wasn't just about the game, was it?" My chest tightened. "No," I admitted, "it wasn't. Caspian turned to face me fully now, his expression unreadable. I could feel the pull in the air, the quiet tension between us sharpening like a held breath. "I've done this camp 3 years," he said. "Led battles, won storylines, but I've never wanted to break character before." I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes weren't intense now. They were searching. "You don't have to," I said. "Not yet." He blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled softly. "Let's see where the story goes." He didn't say anything, but the look on his face said enough. Something had started here, and it wasn't in the script. The next day started like nothing had happened. Caspian didn't look at me during the breakfast announcements. He didn't walk with me to the field, didn't acknowledge me as our teams were briefed on the next quest. But I could feel it. That pull between us hadn't gone anywhere. I caught him glancing over more than once, his jaw tight, like he was thinking too hard. And I got it. Whatever this was between us, it wasn't exactly part of the Crimson Claw storyline. It wasn't even part of my plan. I came here to escape, not to catch feelings for the brooding team leader. And yet, that afternoon, the camp launched its most elaborate event so far, a siege game. The Blue Falcons had to defend a makeshift fort built from logs and tarps. Our job, the Crimson Claw, was to capture it. We were broken into squads. Caspian wasn't in mine, which meant I had to fight without the backup of his presence or the distraction of it. The battle started wild and chaotic. People yelling spells, foam swords clashing, archers lobbing soft-tipped arrows from behind tarp walls. And then I saw him, Caspian, at the edge of the field, coordinating his group like a general. He looked up, saw me, and for a second, everything else faded. We stared. Then he turned away, disappearing into the trees behind the fort. Something tugged at me. I should have stayed in character. I should have stormed the walls with the others, but instead I slipped off from the main fight and followed him. It didn't take long to find him. Caspian stood just out of sight of the battle, leaning against a tree, his hand resting on his sword hilt. When he heard me approach, he didn't turn around. "You're not where you're supposed to be," he said. "Neither are you." He sighed, still not looking at me. "This is not good." "You mean the siege?" "I mean us." That stopped me. He turned slowly, finally meeting my eyes. "This isn't supposed to happen. I come here to lose myself. To be Caspian, not the real guy with bills and heartbreak and stuff he hasn't dealt with." I stepped closer, my heart hammering. "And who says this isn't part of the story?" He let out a breath. "It's not," I nodded. "Then maybe we write our own." He didn't say anything, just looked at me, his expression caught somewhere between conflict and longing. Then he stepped forward and kissed me. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was immediate, like he'd been holding back for days. His hand came to the back of my neck, fingers tightening just slightly as he pulled me in. My hands found his chest, felt the heat through the leather armor. The forest around us went quiet. When we finally pulled apart, he didn't move far, just rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the first night," he admitted. I smiled. I kind of figured. We stood there like that for a while, quiet, just existing in a moment neither of us expected. Eventually, Caspian laughed under his breath. "You know, this completely ruins the cruel commander image I've cultivated for 3 years." "You'll survive," I said, grinning. He looked at me, something softer now in his gaze. "What do we do now?" "I say we finish the siege," I said. "Then maybe sneak away again." He nodded. "Deal." We made it back, just in time for the final push. Caspian slipped back into character so seamlessly it made my head spin. But every so often, he'd glance at me during the charge, and I'd see it, the flicker of something real behind the bravado. That night, under the cover of darkness and fake battle scars, I found him near the edge of the woods again. No costumes, no titles, just him and me. "You still planning to write our own story?" he asked quietly. "Only if you're in it." Caspian didn't answer. He just reached for my hand. We didn't sneak back to camp that night. We stayed out there, just past the tree line, sitting on a moss-covered log, while the sounds of Mythwood faded behind us. The crackling of fires, the distant shouts of late-night players still deep in character. "Out here," It was just quiet. Caspian, real Caspian, not the leader, not the commander, was different when he wasn't surrounded by the expectations of the game. More relaxed, more unsure. "You ever done something like this before?" he asked, fiddling with a twig between his fingers. "What? Kiss someone in the woods during a live-action roleplay event?" I smirked. "Shockingly, no." He let out a laugh, head tilted back, and for the first time since I met him, it felt like the armor, both real and emotional, had cracked. "I meant, gotten close to someone at camp. Mixed real life with the story." I shook my head. "I wasn't even supposed to come. My roommate basically forced me to." "Well," he said, nudging me lightly with his shoulder, "remind me to thank him." We sat like that for a while. Occasionally, we'd hear a group pass by deeper in the woods, torches glowing faintly through the trees, but no one came near. Caspian eventually stretched out, laying back on the moss and staring up at the sky. "You know what sucks?" he said. "What?" "This ends in 3 days." I looked over at him, the starlight barely outlining his face. "And?" "And then we go back to real life, where this might not make sense anymore." That hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. It was easy to fall into something intense. When you were living in a fantasy world, no phones, no emails, no exes or rent or real-life labels. But was it just the camp that made this feel like it worked? I leaned back beside him. "I don't know what happens after," I said honestly. "But I know I don't want this to be part of the story that just disappears." He turned his head toward me, our faces close again. "Me neither," he whispered. His hand found mine in the grass between us, our fingers lacing slowly like we were both afraid to ruin whatever was happening. The next few days blurred into something surreal. Every interaction on the battlefield felt layered with subtext. Caspian barked orders and sparred like always, but the moment we crossed paths, something in his eyes shifted, softer, private. And then there were the stolen moments, a shared glance during meal lines, a lingering touch when he passed me a map, a kiss behind the tent during a water break. Always brief, always risky, but always worth it. On the second-to-last night, the camp held the grand masquerade, a ball around the main fire with music, performances, and dancing. Everyone showed up in costume, masks included, and for once the lines between teams disappeared. I was standing off to the side, sipping some kind of spiced cider, when someone touched my shoulder from behind. I turned, Caspian. But different. He'd ditched his usual armor for something darker. Simple black linen, a fitted vest, a mask that covered just enough of his face to keep the mystery alive. "Dance with me?" he asked. I was about to make a joke about the lack of music when I realized he wasn't kidding. I took his hand. We didn't waltz or anything that formal, just swayed near the edge of the firelight while someone played a slow tune on a lute. No one seemed to notice. Or maybe they did and didn't care. But in that moment, I didn't feel like Thorn. And he wasn't Caspian, it was just me and him. "I don't want to go back," he murmured against my ear. "Then don't." He pulled back slightly, meeting my eyes. "You think this could work?" he asked. "Outside the costumes?" "I think it already is." The last full day of camp arrived with the announcement of the final battle, the reckoning of Mythwood. It was the culmination of the week's events. Alliances formed, betrayals revealed, and one last epic showdown between the Crimson Claw and the Blue Falcons. All the points and quests we'd racked up would feed into the outcome, but this was more about the drama, the spectacle, the storybook ending. Caspian, back in full character mode, stood at the front of our group, giving a rousing speech in his low, serious voice. It would have been inspiring if I hadn't been completely distracted by the way he shot me a glance between lines. A private look, like he hadn't forgotten a single moment of last night. We hadn't talked much after the dance. There hadn't been time. But when he pulled me aside that morning before the battle, away from the others, I knew we were still in the same story. "After this," he said, his hand brushing mine briefly, "meet me at the lake. Just us." I nodded. "Deal." And then we were back in our roles. The final battle was ridiculous in all the best ways. Strategically plotted by the camp leaders, it had everything. secret missions, ambushes, magic tokens, and a final flag capture that ended with players from both teams collapsing in mock exhaustion all over the clearing. At one point, I got stabbed by Julian, who then leaned in and whispered, "You're blushing, bro. Did Caspian finally confess his undying love?" "Shut up," I groaned, and dramatically flopped into the grass like a good little dead soldier. When the horn blew to signal the end, everyone cheered and laughed, sweaty and breathless and glowing with end-of-camp adrenaline. The Blue Falcons technically won, but it hardly mattered. We were all buzzing with the same energy, this weird, bittersweet mix of joy and the looming end of something special. I slipped away before the awards ceremony, heading toward the lake. He was already there. No armor, no mask, just Caspian, jeans, hoodie, hands in his pockets, staring out at the water. "You came," he said without turning. "You asked." He looked over his shoulder and gave me that quiet smile again, the one that always managed to cut through whatever walls I had up. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the wind ripple across the surface. "I almost didn't say anything this week," he said finally. "I told myself I wouldn't cross that line. But then you showed up looking completely lost in that too big tunic and—" He laughed lightly, shaking his head. "I was a goner." I chuckled, stepping closer. "You're saying I seduced you with ill-fitting linen?" He turned to face me fully now, more serious. "I'm saying I didn't expect to feel anything real this week, and I definitely didn't expect you." There was something in his voice that felt heavier than all the previous teasing, something that reached a deeper place. "I get that," I said. "I came here to forget stuff. A breakup. Feeling stuck. Feeling invisible. And now?" I met his eyes. "Now I feel like someone saw me, actually saw me, and didn't look away." He didn't speak. He stepped forward. His arms slid around my waist, pulling me in close. And this kiss, unlike the ones before, wasn't rushed, wasn't hidden, wasn't between roles. It was real. When we pulled apart, we were both a little breathless, but smiling. "So," I said, "what happens next?" Caspian hesitated. "Then, I live in the city. I work from home. I have a place with terrible lighting and a cat who hates everyone. You?" I grinned. "I live 20 minutes away from that." He laughed. "You're kidding." "I'm not." He shook his head. "Of course. Fate really went all in, huh?" I nodded. "Guess so." The camp was winding down behind us. People packing, laughing, saying goodbyes they half meant and half hoped would turn into something more. But I didn't need to hope, because I knew where this story was going now. And it didn't end here. Not at the lake. Not in costume, not in Mythwood. We exchanged numbers before parting ways, but it already felt beyond that. Caspian, real name Evan, I learned, texted me that same night before either of us had even unpacked. "Evan, I miss Mythwood already, but mostly I miss you." I stared at that message longer than I'd care to admit, heart doing things I thought I was too old for. We met up 2 days later, back in the city. No costumes, no swords, just coffee, sneakers, and awkward smiles that turned into laughter way too fast. It should have been weird. The transition from make-believe to reality. But it wasn't. If anything, it was easier. With the pressure off, we got to actually know each other. He was funnier outside of camp. More sarcastic than stoic. He cooked, poorly, and had a cat named Ash, who glared at me like I'd offended her ancestors. He had shelves of books on military history and a secret obsession with cooking shows. I told him things too, stuff I hadn't shared with anyone in months, about my ex, about feeling invisible in my own life, about how Mythwood was the first time in a long time I'd felt like I belonged somewhere. He listened, always. That first month, we kept things casual, or tried to. Weekend hangouts turned into late-night sleepovers, inside jokes, shared playlists. One night, he found the dumb leaf I'd tucked into my pocket during our first forest walk at camp. "You kept this?" he asked. I shrugged. "It was a good day," he smiled. "Every day with you's been better." By the time autumn rolled in, we were a thing. Not are we or aren't we casual, we were together. One night, curled up on his couch with a storm pounding outside, Evan pulled me closer and said, "This feels like home." It hit me harder than I expected. Because it was. We didn't tell many people how we met at first. Saying we fell for each other while pretending to be fantasy warriors in a LARPing forest didn't exactly feel casual. But eventually, we stopped caring. He came with me to a party Julian threw, and when someone asked how we met, Evan didn't hesitate. "He ambushed me in the woods," he said with a grin, "and stole more than just a battle point." I rolled my eyes. "He's dramatic." "Only for you." That night when we got home, he kissed me slow, the way he always did when we were somewhere between playful and serious. "I don't want to lose this," he said quietly, "even when life gets messy." "We won't," I said. "We already fought one fantasy war together. Real life doesn't stand a chance." He laughed. "God, I love you." I blinked, then smiled. "Yeah, I love you too." We went back to Mythwood the next summer. This time, we signed up together. Same team, no secrets. We didn't need to hide glances behind masks or sneak off after battles. Everyone knew. And honestly, everyone loved it. Julian called us the camp's first power couple, and Evan just grinned like a guy who'd secretly been proud of that all year. We even co-led the Crimson Claw. And let me tell you, watching Evan give orders in his full leather armor while sneaking me a wink between strategy meetings, still just as hot. But beyond the fun, the swords, the over-the-top fantasy, something else had settled between us, a steadiness. We were still us. The guy who hated mornings and the one who stress-cleaned the kitchen. The guy who got overwhelmed in crowds and the one who rubbed circles into his back without being asked. No costumes, no characters, just us. One night we ended up back at the same lake, same log, same view. Except this time, he wasn't nervous. He pulled something from his pocket. Not a ring. Not anything official. Just a small red ribbon. The one I wore tied around my sword hilt the first year. "I kept it," he said. "Figured if things ever got tough, I could look at it and remember that day. Remember what it felt like to fall for someone when I didn't see it coming." I reached out, laced my fingers with his. "Still got it," I whispered. We didn't need grand speeches, just that quiet look, that knowing smile. Because in a place built on stories, we'd written our own. And it was real. It still is.